it's funny because I was literally just in Mexico with you, and now we're on this like official platform pretending like we're so.
I know. I know. It'll be a fun time. I've been looking forward to this. And like, I'm glad that you were able to be flexible because last week was like super stressful. And now I'm like, oh, I kind of love jumping into the things that I want to do on a Monday. It's great.
That's actually, I was curious because you've done this a few times now, right? Like you've had more than one show at this point. Do you have any sort of ritual or routines to your life at this point? Or is it just kind of like fucking random?
You'd think I would. I haven't. If there's a grand lesson to be learned in all of this, I'm waiting to graduate. A lot of writers, even when I listen to podcasts or like, their methods, they seem to have it figured out. And they're like, well, here's what I do. And I'm like, that's great. I kind of go with the flow in the moment because every project is so different. And I'm just like, maybe one day I'll find my own workflow or my own kind of machine that goes. But right now I just roll with the punches and make it up as I go along. So.
Do you have any like pre-writing rituals when you sit down to write? Is there like, do you have to have like a clean desk and a coffee and like a thing? Or is there just like, you just do it when you have time?
I am a professional procrastinator. So yeah, the desk has to be cleaned, but not only that, all of the dishes have, especially working from home. I look around and if there's something like, seasonal decor is like, it was October 31st and then on November 1st, I had a major deadline and I was like, I can't because the Halloween decorations are still out. I'm so sorry, project. I'm going to have to come back to you later. And I spent the whole day putting decorations away. I will say, this is kind of a sideways answer to your question. I've always found that writing is maybe 10% actually writing. And so much of it comes from the fluid in between. It's going on walks with my dog, it's listening to books and podcasts. I love driving in my car with music, and it's just doing something around, in your day-to-day life for your mental health, whether that's working out or cleaning your apartment. So much of storytelling I have found comes to me in those moments, and then the work and my craft is like that 10% where you just have to like sit down and do it. Going back to your question, no, I think if I do have a pre-ritual, it's just, I love a good iced coffee on my desk with my laptop. I need glasses now, so those have to be available. And then other than that, I've tried writing to music, which sometimes I can do now, but actually it's easier to just put on kind of background cafe noises or something because I used to love going to coffee shops and having that experience where you feel like you're a part of a co-op. And so, whether I'm at WeWork, I enjoy that, or Thrive or a cafe. But when I'm home, I kind of have to cheat the synergy to be like, oh no, I need to be here. Someone needs to be making coffee in the background for me to feel productive.
Yeah, there's something about I think that's why people miss offices is like that collective, like we are all working, like it works for some reason.
It's an energy that's lacking. Or I should say, there's obviously like many pros to working from home, the flexibility. And when I was in a writer's room, it would be great where we would meet for 2 hours and then you'd have a 2 hour break to like throw in that load of laundry or to like make yourself lunch or go work out and get out of your system and then come back and be ready to work. There's a lot of productivity that comes with that. It's an energy that you thrive off of other people working hard and you kind of like want to match them. And that's what you're not
Yeah.
getting at home.
Yeah, and that's also something I think is worth noting for a lot of jobs in this industry. It feels like there's we feel very isolated, even before the pandemic, right? Like as actors, we'd go in little rooms and do our like piece and then we would leave. Or like writers, where if you're not in your room, especially if you're writing something solo, you're kind of in your own piece. And a ton of actors also write who listen to this. And because they're not in writers' rooms, it feels very isolating. Are there things you've done to like fight against that? Because I know you're writing beyond just in writers' rooms.
So luckily, I am not just a writer, but I'm also a showrunner and executive producer of my projects. And with that comes a huge plus. I get to go on set and interact and produce. So back in the day, a showrunner, you spend time crafting the series in the writer's room, and then the showrunner would obviously be on set. But writers would also go and produce their individual episodes. And whether that means, being on set available just to write, to come up with like the line swaps, or, production realities are like, hey, we had to actually change it to here. This would maybe change the dialogue. They would be available. And it's just cheaper now to send one person. So the showrunner will go and just do all of it. As much as I love like working around the clock, it's a huge drawback that I've seen where that was the training program. That was how to get writers the proper experience to like be on set learning that. And I mean, so this all comes back to if I was just a writer where I was on Zoom 5 days a week and then I would have to like bury my head into writing, which I feel like as an actor, like learning your lines and reading sides, especially in this new era where like people don't go to auditions anymore. I mean, do you? Is that like in your experience? Is it getting back to that
I,
place? Or I feel like self tapes is just the new norm for here
I
to stay.
I think they're gonna stay. A few commercials I've gone back for in a room, but like, I mean, even the last commercial I booked, it was audition, self tape, and then Zoom
Yeah.
callback. And like, I'm fine with that now because I can practice in exactly the frame that they're gonna
Oh, I know.
see.
It gives you autonomy over your craft where you can, almost direct and be like, I know exactly what I'm turning in. And I think that's a huge upside. So I'm all here for self tapes. When I cast people for my shows, it's all through self tapes. Even when we do callbacks, it's all through Zoom. And I think as, society, we've kind of had to learn how to like pull out the energy through the computer screen. But what you do miss out on is the interactions. And so I'd imagine, like, as an actor, if you're in the room, you can get feedback in the moment and kind of make those decisions on the fly to like evaluate and tweak your performance, which is acting. Like, that's what it is. It's not just how sharp you could have memorized your sides and prepared this take on it. And so as a writer, it does feel very much, if you're putting people at home and then on Zoom to write, and it's such like a solitary field anyway, you're just with you're in storyland and your thoughts. To go from that into set where all now you're really balancing so many different tasks and a lot of people are depending on you. Your job is not writing at all on set. And so I thrive on that. I like having a lot more responsibilities and creative control. So I would say yes, I do get that experience of getting to interact with my colleagues and to feel like part of a team. But for a lot of writers and for a lot of actors out there that are still trying to just get callbacks, I can see how it's a one-sided thing. You can work on something for so long and have the utmost confidence in your craft and what you're doing, and you set it off, and there's no process anymore that tells you how close to the mark you were. You could have been 10% or 100%, and you will never know.
I know, and it makes that like age old saying of saying like telling actors like have an opinion, make a choice. And so I'm making bolder choices as I get older in this business because I'm like, well, I think this makes complete sense based on my knowledge of script and all these things. And it could be so off base, but with a little tweak, I
Mhm.
could really find it, I think. But there's not a lot of time to give feedback. There's not a lot of time to do second tapes. I don't think I have yet been asked to do a second take on an audition with notes, which
Oh,
I'm
wow.
sad about.
Yeah, I actually think when I'm qualifying an actor for my show, luckily as a showrunner, I get to be very involved in the process, more so than directors even, because if we have a series of 6 episodes, there's going to be
Mhm.
multiple directors, and so the showrunner's job would be to consistent, that will this person be able to do what we know is coming later in the season. And so, for instance, we had one character who was going to start off lovable and
Mhm.
become a villain. No one knew that but me in the audition process. And I think we had kind of flagged it. But we brought this kid in and he was so great. And I was like, what if you had to do this, but just like super sinister? And gave him all of these kind of feelings to consider if he had to give the same performance but with a lot of resentment towards your friends. I didn't tip off that you're going to be a villain. I didn't tip off anything like that. And he crushed it. And that's something where I feel like if you're just submitting without the normal process, you're not in the room, so it's not a playground anymore. It's very window shoppy, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It is. It is. It is. It's true. It's true. And I'm just like, all right, well, just Do the best we can. I would love to get into there's a couple things I want to hit on today. I absolutely want to talk about working with younger actors, which is something you have a lot of experience with from the Are You Afraid of the Dark? But I want to talk about show running specifically, because this is something we had an episode earlier this season with Ian Weinreich, who
Oh,
is a
yes.
writer on The
Flight
Flight
attendant.
Attendant.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the Dead Boys Detective, which is a new HBO show. And he was talking about that, the same thing you just mentioned, which was that writers used to get to produce an episode and then they would get to like have this training on set, and then what, like they would work these years up and eventually become showrunners. But now the system is kind of shortened because there's less people on set, there's more people going. And I feel like, I mean, tell me how you feel about this, but from watching you as a friend, I feel like you became a showrunner so fast. So can you talk us
I
through how
did.
that happened for you?
I mean, it's interesting. I don't know which beginning to start at, because I moved to LA with the intention to write and direct movies, and I got really lucky by, I sold a script, it went into development, and classic Hollywood story. Then like no one called me back, and I was like, oh, that was the end of my fun.
When you were writing that script, though, you were editing. Is that correct?
Well,
So you still had a job like in the
no,
business?
so this was like 10 years ago. I was still living in Kansas
Ah,
City, and I sold a script because I had directed a movie with $0 in college. So I just like told my friends, some were actors, some were non-actors, and it was in the height of like found footage horror, where I was like, we're gonna go to a lake
great.
house and I have $1,000 to buy, like, you can go shopping, buy your character outfit, buy a lot of booze, and we're just gonna have like this week in a cabin. And we shot a whole movie. The trailer went on YouTube, and there was this company. They're still around today, very successful. They bought the rights to the movie, but they had asked if we could
Cool.
redevelop it where it's no longer found footage. It's kind of going out of style. Let's put 5 million into the movie
So they found you from having the trailer
on
on YouTube?
YouTube. That was how my entire kind of launch into the business started, where I was just like everyone else, this college kid. I'm from Missouri, and I couldn't afford the expensive schools. So I went to a University of Central Missouri. So it's just a small state school. They didn't have a film program. It was called broadcast media. And on my very
Mhm.
first day of like this, they had this speaker come in, and I remember they said, "Hey, broadcast is dying, just so all of you know." So they built us all up in that moment where we're like, we know, but what do you want us to do about it? Change majors again? And so it wasn't really a film program, but I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Oh my God.
So I started renting, there were two camcorders that the campus
Mm.
owned, and I started renting those out every weekend and just shooting my own stuff. I wrote a mini series with 6 episodes, and I have no idea why we thought this would be manageable. It was the most ambitious thing ever to produce a 6 episode drama around campus. But halfway through production, campus was like, you can't use our property to make your own things anymore. It's not learning anymore. And I was like, oh, I would very much argue that it is, because we are like producing it ourselves and having to
Ah,
write these things ourselves. And it really taught everyone, those who wanted to be actors and behind the camera, what to do. I worked at Applebee's, saved up some money, went out and bought that same kind of
yes.
camcorder. It's like very Blair Witch Project. Like we're talking that level of a
This is
camcorder.
I love this. Also, I forget how parallel our lives are, that like I was at Missouri State and you were at Central Missouri, and I worked at Denny's and you worked at Applebee's.
I
Like
know, we really are. It's the Hollywood story, Sam. Like we're and it's so funny that then it took like a CrossFit gym for us to meet.
for sure. For sure. Okay, so you had this mediocre, probably like flip cam
Yes, and
camcorder.
the intention was to keep shooting it for this series, but by then I own the camera, and I was like, let's do a movie, because then we can actually sell it. We were never intending to do anything with
Mm.
the series except put it on campus cable network.
Ah, like a true broadcast journalism major.
Yeah, well, like if you're in a dorm room and you turn on that college thing and it's a PowerPoint that's just showing ads, we were like, what if that was actually a show that we made? Rest in peace. It will
Genius.
it will never see the light of day unless someone wants to produce these 6 amazing scripts that are just sitting there.
You never know.
But I had my friend who played a role in that campus show. And I was like, I'm just going to write a movie, like a found footage horror film. And I cast him as the lead. We shot it. The trailer went wide. And then we also shot some comedy sketches just in our apartments. And our YouTube channel got a lot of attention overnight. You know, content creation is obviously still around. It's here to stay forever. Because of the YouTube channel having access with these comedy sketches, then you would like randomly see this trailer for a indie horror film. And so people reached out and they're like, what is this movie? And it caught the sights of, there was a company, it's Blumhouse. And back in the day, they were doing Paranormal Activity. And there was a script that they sent me called Vigilandia. And they're like, this is a $5 million movie. This is kind of in the space that we're thinking for yours. Well, Vigilandia was the working title for The Purge, which a few people have seen. So,
yes, familiar. Yes.
Yeah. I actually flew out to LA. I hadn't graduated college yet, and I was working on this script. And so I was thinking, oh, I've made it. Like, Hollywood is so easy. Like, oh, you just have to have one good idea and be able to like smile your way through a Paramount meeting. And then when I actually moved, I found out nothing was going to go forward anymore. It was like a fun experience, but everything got shelved. So I had to get a job at a cute little coffee shop called Starbucks, and I was slinging lattes just like everyone else. And because I, had kind of saved money through college by editing like wedding videos or, family function videos, little commercials, I had editing experience. And so I got quickly hired at a studio, and I kind of worked my way up onto some big movies like Godzilla and Transformers. And at Legendary Pictures, I was there for a little bit and took a step back to start producing some independent films. Just things like, I was still getting a paycheck. It was no money at all, but I felt like it was closer to what I wanted to be doing. And this is when, I took my biggest step back, and I said, I'm unhappy. It's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. Like, wouldn't it be grace if you could, if like the script was good to begin with and the actors involved were talented and like the directing wasn't just like, so bad that we had to kind of cheat our way to a good movie through editing. I think this was at the time when I was at Brick CrossFit, where I quit all of my jobs and I was living off of like any penny that I had saved. And I wrote a feature spec script, a horror script. And that's a tough, like, when it's so much easier said than done. A lot of the times, and I'll give everyone advice on this podcast now, if you're looking to break into writing, it's such an annoying thing to hear, but you really do just have to work the job for what you want to do, in addition to the job that is your reality. Easier said than done, but because it's those nights when like you've come home, you've worked a long day, paying your bills, you're getting your life together, you're trying to have social life, you're trying to network. Now find the motivation to sit down in front of your laptop and start writing words. It's like the least sexy thing about Los Angeles and about following your dreams. But I kind of decided in that year, I was like, I would like, my friends will, and it's so funny talking to you, Sam, because we're very good friends. She literally did the reading at my wedding last month, and I feel like I get to see you maybe 6 times a year if I'm like super lucky. And it's because, but
not it. Yeah, no, truly, because it's like, well, adult. This is good at what it turns into, but you are so busy.
Yeah.
I feel
well,
like
I made that decision, or like I kind of just woke up and I said, this is what I want to do, and it's going to be really hard work, but I will put in everything I have, and any other facet of my life can take second priority. And like, luckily, like if you have good friends, they're not going to miss you. If you tell your friends that you're going to disappear for 3 weekends because you're going to follow your dreams, will absolutely support you. If they miss you, that's one thing, but they will never hold it against you. And if they do, then you need a new friends anyway. So
yeah, but that's also the magic of having, I feel like, friends once we're in our 30s and like everyone's kind of doing their specific thing, is like we all really understand what it takes to just keep going.
Right. And I don't think it never gets easier. You just start getting bigger opportunities that then demand more and more time. And we'll get to like, I would love to talk about how like managing like the realities of your career versus, your expectations. But as I wrote this horror spec, I sent it to the
Yes.
same people that I had met, almost 8 years prior to that point. And they were like, "Oh, you're still alive. Congrats. This is really good." And I had one general meeting where, and again, a lot of it comes down to just keep networks alive and always have a good like portfolio ready to go whenever someone asks for it, because they said, "Listen, we have this book. We've been paying writers left and right to try to crack it as a movie.
Hmm.
It's never gone anywhere. Do you just want to read the book? We cannot pay you. If you have an interesting take on it, maybe you could write it on spec." And I read it and called them back and I said, "I think your problem is it's not a show, or it's not a movie, it's a television show." And I pitched my take on that, and it ended up going around, Netflix, Amazon, and it sold to Quibi back when that happened. And it kind of just launched me into kind of my writing career. I got representation at UTA. And I was, going in all of these generals, and everyone wanted,
Yeah.
to see what's on my slate. Could I, maybe adapt this book, or, did I have anything that I was developing? And my agent called me and said, "You are selling things too fast," because I had sold 3 projects. And he's like, "We need to get you into a writer's room so that you can actually have experience." And I love that, because I was like, I would very much love to like learn the ropes before I'm throwing the ropes. And it just so happened that one of the companies that I had sold a show to, they were producing Are You Afraid of the Dark? I took the job as a staff writer, entry level point as a staff writer. Obviously, there's an assistance and support below that. But yeah, I would say within 3 months, I went from staff writer to showrunner of the series. And it was a lot of luck and just special circumstances. The showrunner who was attached was great. There was just a difference of ideas of where to take the show, especially writing YA content is very tricky. And it wasn't working out. And at one point, they had approached the other writers on the project, because there was a room of maybe 6 of us. And they asked each of us our take on how we would continue the show. And I pitched my version and I got the job. And so obviously that was like an extremely lucky circumstance. But after producing, or after, getting to be showrunner and then producing 6 episodes of TV, writing all episodes by myself, for season 2, I was invited back to do season 3. And now that's just, kind of where I'm grabbing new shows. So
I mean, you say luck, but also though that decision of like that you made earlier on, that this is what I'm going to make happen. I'm going to just find time to write along with the world I'm living in. I'm going to nurture my network. All the things that you did, yeah, the timing aligned, but the things you had done to get yourself there also aligned. And that's something I always want to emphasize to actors, is because it's very easy to say like, well, I got lucky. And like, right, like we can't discount timing and all those
mhm.
things, but sometimes we want to get to a point, but we have to have a backlog of understanding of the work we're getting into and the work we've done, I think, to get there sometimes. And I think your work ethic and your luck and your timing lined up, and that equaled your luck to get into that door.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a controlled luck.
Mhm.
I don't think anyone who has their job, even nepotism babies at this point,
Mhm.
I think they're like, everyone here has to have put in the work. You're not going to get lucky just by writing one script and having it on your laptop. And no one's going to discover you that way. It's the same way. No one is going to be able to, you do one audition and then no one's going to be knocking on your door being like, "Oh my God, we loved you. Can you come back into this one?" Not right away. You have to control your own luck, which means just arm yourself with the best chances. When the opportunity does and will present itself at some point, are you ready for the stars to align on your end? Because, on Are You Afraid of the Dark? I'm going to segue into like casting actors, because this is an acting podcast, obviously. But there was, I was writing season 2
Yeah.
and we were starting to think of the cast. And I didn't show run the first season, but they said, "Here are these kids that auditioned. They're all under 15. They auditioned for season 1, and we liked some of these." I saw a tape for this kid, Bryce Geyser, and immediately I was like, he is who I picture in my head now when I'm writing this character.
What stage were you in the writing process when you started to see tapes for actors?
So it was a special circumstance for my show. We started a writer's room and had it go on for about 3 to 4 months. And by then, the majority of the show should have been like script ready. I came on as showrunner and had to redevelop it from scratch. And we had a pilot script out in June and started attaching a director. I was flying to Vancouver for quarantine for 2 weeks in August. And at that time, flying to the city where we're shooting the
This
show.
was 2020.
This was 2020, yeah, right in the height of COVID. We flew, they greenlit the show, and I was in Vancouver with only one episode out of 6 written. And
Oh
so
my God.
when it was quite crazy, I had written the second one and the fourth one during my quarantine days, like in a house. That was when, at the same time, we were casting the show because it was shooting in like 3 weeks from that day. And so, yeah, it
Whoa.
happened very fast. I would say normally you're going to get a lot of the scripts out. Certainly the whole story would be done before they start looking at actors. If it's an established show, I'll say. If it's a show that's going on pilot, it would be for sure after the pilot has been written and passed back and forth and is like very sharp. Luckily, I mean, it was a lot of hard work having to write the scripts. At one point, we actually started shooting the show. We shot them in blocks. So episodes 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6. At one point, episodes 1 and 2 had been shot, and I was giving editing notes while we were shooting episodes 3 and 4. So I was on set working with that. And then I would have to find time to be writing episodes 5 and 6 all in those 2 weeks. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, but the show ended up turning out great. You would never know.
You know, no idea. It's a great season. Holy shit.
Still, it haunts me where I would be watching a take, they would yell cut. I'd give an actor a note or something really quickly, and then I would run to like a set that wasn't being used on the stage. Like we had like a teenage boy's bedroom, and he had like this desk with all of his like fake homework on it. And I would be like, I can't clean off this desk because it's part of the show, but I would put my laptop there and just try to write, like, even if it was just half a page before they're like, okay, rolling. And I would run back. And that's how episodes 5 and 6 were written.
Oh my God. Talk about utilizing those time management skills of doing what happens, what you can, when you can, back from then. So watching actor tapes and casting this show when like it was such a jumble, right? What were because a lot of these actors had auditioned for the first season. Going into the second one, did you have an idea of what you were looking for? Were there some things that surprised you? And what stood out in these tapes, especially for younger actors?
For sure. I think I actually have a reputation now, at least with my team and the executives who work closely with me. I do not provide any physical character descriptions at all in my scripts. You will not find one unless if it like clearly is the point of view into the character. I wish I could even provide you with an example, but I don't have one. I think the representation on screen and just characters, they should come in all shapes and sizes and colors and things. So I never provide that information. And casting, I've had, good relationships with casting because of that. And also a lot of headaches because they're like, what are you looking for?
I was going to say, how do they feel about that?
I think everyone supports it in theory, but when it comes down to finding, the pieces, and especially with kids, it does become a headache because it could go in any direction. I love that though. I will have 5 front runners, who are going out for this one character, and depending on who we cast there, whether it's a man or a woman, or whether they're Black or they're white or they're Asian, then it might dictate the next character. Because you don't, like, I'm not going out for rainbow casting. I want it to feel authentic, but my approach is, I think you need to give it to the person who best brings out the character. And you can't do that with any parameter. So putting a parameter and saying, I want the best character for this, you're limiting yourselves from the people who didn't have it. And then likewise, for the past 100 years of Hollywood, it's been the opposite, where it's like, no, we want the best white actor. And look at how many, we're only now finally getting to see diverse faces on screen, especially with kids, because it seems so, like, look at any friendship circle. Like, it does not look like the Friends, where you just have 6 white people, beautiful white people.
Yeah. And there's almost an added pressure too to like give opportunity, because I mean, I'm sure you remember this as a kid growing up in Missouri. I turned on Nickelodeon, and at the time it was all white people. And
always.
Like I didn't see anybody else. And I lived in these tiny little suburban neighborhoods where like that's all I saw. And it was part of the reason I was like, get me to a city. But I think that's actually kind of rad that you see that. So how many people are you seeing for a role then?
Well, it varies. I will say, especially because they're minors, it all goes through our casting, and they filter out quite a lot. And so our casting director is going to try to provide the kids and the tapes that they think, they did not only a good job skill-wise, that, can these kids act? Because I do think that's a big difference between children and more experienced actors, where it does come down where we have to filter out the ones where it's like, this is a school play, child, love you, but then now you can carry a show and actually deal with the pressure of when it comes to, can you have 40-year-old men, like mean directors yelling at you on set, which I hate, and I try never to like allow that happen. But we see a lot. I would say thousands of tapes with, like, yes, a lot of them had auditioned for season 1. So for season 2, I was reviewing these tapes and I was like, I love this kid. He has like a spark. I kind of want to develop that for him. And I only saw his voice. He ended up getting the role. And then for season 2, there were so many other great actors. There was this kid, we had 2 really amazing kids go out for the role of like the comedic jokester. One is Arjun. He ended up getting the role for season 2, but there was this kid named Luca who was so good. And I was like, it could go either way. And it ended up going in Arjun's favor. And I remember wanting to reach out to Luca and being like, I wish you could understand, and I think I'm speaking broadly to all actors here, how you could do everything right. And it's not about you at that point. It's about, structuring the show around, or is it about deals? It can come down to someone has a thought about what you're going to look like in the scene itself compared to this person, but be memorable no matter what you do, no matter how silly the audition is. Because for season 3, I called back Luca and I was like, you auditioned for second season. I picture you for this one. And we cast him right away. And so as long as you're engaging and make an impression, hopefully a good impression, but even if it doesn't stick for this one job, you would be amazed that, even, years could go by. The person who you affected is still thinking about that one amazing tape where it didn't work out, and you will be their first call. I guarantee it.
What stuck out to you in auditions? Because it's hard to sometimes break through, especially what advice would you give to we have a lot of parents of younger actors and younger actors who listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right way to qualify tapes, but because everyone's different. And I think there's a lot of people who are listening right now who are also trying to like, what's the secret formula? Like,
Always.
What is the yes and the no of self-tapes? Mine might be the worst advice ever, but I love, because they tell you never to look into the camera. I disagree. I have found that I find more engagement if you're looking to the camera, or just like off camera, like, camera left or something like that. Just slightly, because if I can see your eyes and if I feel part of the scene, there's a different engagement to where I'm just watching a scene, how a director would shoot it. And so here's where I can understand there's difference of opinions, because a lot of people think if I just shoot this like like it's going to look in the movie, this is exactly what some people are wanting. And I don't know if it's because I'm the showrunner and not directing the episodes, but I disagree. All the tapes I see have that same framing where they're looking and you're almost seeing them, side profile, and they're engaging with someone who's really compelling in their apartment that I can't see. And I'm like, when you put that person who you're speaking with behind my shoulder, I feel all the lines that you're giving me, and I can clearly see the emotion on your face. And so it is a cheat. It's never going to look like that in the movie, but my gosh, it's effective on me. And other than that, as far as anything technical, I even don't care what, you should have good lighting because casting directors love good lighting. I understand what it's like to shoot in a low light apartment, but make sure your face is all pretty. I think my only other thing that I look for is make it yours, especially if you know a writer's going to be watching. If this is for a TV show, the showrunner will be watching on some level. He's going to have to approve the cast, even if he's not watching the early rounds, he or she or they. And the important thing to remember is the showrunner, whoever they are, have listened to these words in their head forever. They know exactly what they're going to sound like and what they're supposed to. So if you, as an actor, as a performer, as an artist, can change it and surprise the showrunner, the writer, the director, it automatically wins them over because it could be wrong, but it was different and they would have never thought of that themselves, which we all want, especially me. I think I would always give the job to the person who surprised it because they outsmarted the dialogue.
I was going to say, I want to add that caveat, like, guys, with correct motivation, like not because you just wanted to do something different.
Yes, exactly. Oh, yes. I do think it has to be choices. I love a good choice, but you have to give an intention. I would not encourage anyone to read a funeral scene like a broad slapstick comedy, unless if you're like, no, JT, I'm for sure, this is my golden idea. It's going to work. Put some thought into it, but I guess it also depends on your show. So do your research. I know for Modern Family, those writers wrote in cadences. Aaron Sorkin writes in cadence with his dialogue. That's why it's so brilliant. And they're not interested in a performer's take on changing those. So you better hit those commas and you better hit those beats. Mine, I approach it with the other philosophy. If you can change the sentence syntax, even change the line around and give it a stronger meaning that I think was an improvement. It's a risk, but if it's an improvement, I will fall in love with you. And I will think this performer absolutely earned their callback, their take at the job. So
Is there anything in terms of auditioning and like probably especially doing like callbacks and things like that with younger actors that you feel like is different than working with more seasoned actors? Do you feel like, I personally would feel like almost a pressure to like take care of them in a way? Is there a different way you work with them in that aspect?
I do. I didn't see it at first myself because Are You Afraid of the Dark was the first thing that I had really done on a professional level. I'd worked with actors. I did 48-hour films. I did my own found footage movies. But when it's a professional setting, I wanted to do it right. And I'm learning on the job with these young kids. And so, I mean, that's not actually true. Some of them have had so much more experience than I did. So I was learning from them. But my approach was simple. My first priority was to make sure they're comfortable. And I think this should be a standard for any working environment, not just with, if you're working with minors, child actors who we know have in the past have like notoriously had it the hardest. But I reach out to them and their families just to let them know I will be here with whatever you need. Make them comfortable, make them understand like this is their set. You're a guest in their working careers and vice versa. And we're going to make a great team. So always want them to feel safe and comfortable and excited to come to work that day. And then when it comes to the actual day job, set life is hard. Any actor who's been on set, whether it's you're there 12 plus hours as background, like just standing in the same place, that's a hard day. If you're giving your Viola Davis monologue where you're bursting into tears and you're going on take 10, that's a hard day. It's also a hard day when you're showing up and you're the lead character and we're covering everyone else but you that day. And so we're just behind you and you have to keep giving enough to your co-stars to get a good reaction. And so all of these are things that, especially children, they're not used to, and it can be exhausting. My biggest approach is setting the bar high. Tell them what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. And I'm almost trying to mentor them for their next job. I want all of them to succeed. Luckily, I've never had I've had issues on my show with some actors. None of them were the kids. So I've been very, very lucky because I think kids are impressionable and they want to impress you, and they're willing to admit mistakes and to learn. And yeah. So
I was going to ask you, are there things that you've seen with child actors that you wish that more adult actors would do?
Come prepared. Absolutely come prepared. I don't know if it's just because, Are You Afraid of the Dark? If you're working with like 7 minors and these teenagers where we're like, listen, you're going to be out running in the cold. You're a family. We need to get through this because we don't have 20 minutes to lose. We kind of motivated them to be like, this is a team. This whatever you were making is going to be available forever, and we want you to feel proud of it. This is your big TV show. That requires, I don't know if we're going to wrap late and you want to go back to the hotel room and eat pizza and have a celebration, but just make sure you know your lines coming in the next day and ask the right questions and kind of be sharp, ready to do it. I've never, since having those powwows, had an issue with a young person coming in who's not on their A game. Whereas we would bring adults in who are just day players, and they, I don't care if you're on 3 different TV shows at the same time. If you took the job, you're doing the job. They would come in, not know their lines, and we're wasting precious time for them to remember while our 16-year-old actor, he's turning into a pumpkin and we lose him. And the pressure falls down on the child more than the adult, because now we're like, well, you got to give us everything perfect. There's no wiggle room for you anymore. Yeah, I would say that's the biggest difference. Also, I would say normally with children, you want to shoot closer to the script, less room to play. And with adult actors, you want to give them a longer leash. We have a lot of great improv actors on our show. But for season 3, we kind of flipped that narrative and we wanted to give the kids, we would always call it scrappy it up. And so we would get everything safe that we needed. And then for the second to last take, we would say, scrappy it up, do whatever you want. They would make such interesting choices that would never, ever work for the show. But it did let them loosen up how they're feeling and how they've said the lines, because then when you grab your last take, it was sensational every time. So, yeah.
I mean, that's something we could all use in general, I think, for self-tapes and everything, to just like do one fast and loose and then like get it in.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's very useful. Well, we're flying here, but I did want to talk about the 2 seasons of Are You Afraid of the Dark you've done so far. The first one was in Canada, and then the second one was in Dominican Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And you are working on more stuff right now. Like, there's a lot going on, but you've also worked, because of those ramifications too, you've worked with a lot of local hire actors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious how that works, because obviously you bring in your ensemble cast, like your leads from the bigger cities from the US. But in terms of working with local hires, there's a lot of actors who listen to this podcast who are from small markets, even outside of the US. They're often told to just get to a big city and just start working and stuff. But the people you found, how did you find them? And what are some things you learned about working with the locals?
I think anyone who's telling you to move to a big city because you want to be an actor is going on an antiquated idea of what it means to be an actor. That might be true for your agent wants you to move to the city because when you're in meetings, it's going to be more available. And I'm speaking, this was even pre-COVID, before the world changed and went remote. So many things don't shoot in LA anymore. They shoot in cities all across the world. Specifically, I'll keep it to like our country and Canada. Local actors are not only necessary, they're like the backbone of the project. So I flew up to Vancouver. We shot the show there. I think we were there for 4 months. Based on like the tax laws and everything, we knew that we needed one of the leads of the show to be local. in order to qualify. We actually ended up casting 3 local actors, all from Vancouver: Malia Baker, Beatrice Kitsos, and Dominic Mariche, and like stars of the show. And it's because, we had to look at local actors anyway. And I was like, I don't care if they've been on Nickelodeon before. I don't care how many TikTok fans they have. Get me the best kids. And so when we couldn't find that with our Americans, I said, open the floodgates. Like, show me the Vancouver tapes, and fell in love with all of these actors. And those were just for the leads. Every other role, period, was a local hire, because we don't have the money to fly in, oh, I love this actor from New York, or I love this, actress from LA. Let's get her here. No, that doesn't happen. They're always looking to save money. And so they're going to tap into local markets. And so this is when I would argue, as much as you might gain from sitting at Earth Cafe in Los Angeles and like pretending to schmooze and meet agents, which we all know is just, fodder, like it's all fake. No one's actually networking. And this is not to say avoid those networking parties, because I think networking is a huge part of your responsibility, as like, if you want to get in the door with someone, walk through some doors. But that also applies to, are you in Austin, Texas, or are you in Atlanta, or are you up in Vancouver, or anywhere in the, these areas where you're seeing film crews pop up. Because if you can network and get to know a casting director, do some local theater, get into some local contests where casting directors go and see. Because when the time comes, and it's inevitable, the production will say, all right, Vancouver local casting, give us your best. They will be your best friend and your biggest advocate. They will show us your tapes. If we might say not who we're looking for, they'll show us twice. They'll say, nope, I'm going to have them redo it. We'll keep going. You can absolutely make a living just doing local hire on projects, because there's so many shows that depend on it, whether it's a career as doing, day playing or small arcs. I will tell you this little story. For season 2 of Are You Afraid of the Dark, one of the adult characters, his name was Sardo. And when I wrote the role, we put it out towards men, and we were not finding the best luck with it, because it was one of those, it could be campy and extra broad comedy. And I wanted a different approach to it. So I asked casting, can you send it out to any gender or non-gender? I was like, just let's open this up to any performer who could play Sardo. And there was this wonderful actress named Kaylin Miles. She auditioned for the role, and I loved her. She was a local hire. She was just like a local comedian, and she would kind of audition on the side. I was like, I don't care. She's doing this new age earth thing where she's like lighting incense, and she has this big fucking scarf for no reason in the sides. And I just fell in love with the comedy of it all, where I was like, cast her as Sardo. It ended up not working out for that character, because I think there were just preconceived notions like, no, let's honor the legacy of, like, we found this other great guy who was the perfect Sardo.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, he was great.
Yeah, he was fantastic. But I loved Kaylin so much, where I wrote her own role in the show. And she plays the teacher who's in 5 of the 6 episodes, named Miss Schaffner. And she was so fucking funny in that show. And I would like die for her, and I would tell anyone to hire her. But now she's kind of playing like a similar role in another Paramount Plus show that's coming out soon. And this was it's like a story of a local hire that, she was just funny, and she was what I was looking for. And that's all it takes. And so don't be afraid to submit locally. I even tell friends in LA, I shouldn't be telling them this, because this is like adding to the problem of making it more competitive for local actors. But I'm like, if you're not finding luck here, go visit Vancouver. Go visit one of these other cities and maybe try out an audition, because you'd be surprised that your luck might change. Not that the pool is smaller necessarily, but it just might be it's a better fit for you. So.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are from Canada, so it was very easy for them to move.
Mm-hmm.
Not easy, but easier for them to move home, and because they don't have to deal with the green card, all the visa ramifications of that. But they are enjoying themselves very much, living where they want to live, and like auditioning how they audition, and just living the life, and they're having a great time. And it's just so nice to think that actors are everywhere. We are everywhere. And you just have to, you got to do the work. You got to meet the people and still have the agents and then get the opportunities.
It
but
is. And
it's there, it's there.
with season 3, we shot it in the Dominican Republic, and I think actually like 86% of the cast, like on camera, were all locals, and we had flown in the kids, but every other role was someone that who we found on the island, and they were just like so remarkable. And obviously, there's some who they can fly back and forth between the U.S., and those are, I would say, the privileged local actors, where if I had a show shooting in New York and she would say, okay, I'll put myself up in New York and I'll be a local hire there. That's obviously like, you're blessed if you can do something like that. But either way, I would not be discouraged by being in one of these, other cities, because if Hollywood uses your town, they're going to use the local talent there.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more question before we go. And it's that we are in this like really fun time, and a lot of actors who listen to this are, where we are all starting to come up in our lives. Like, I think after like you like struggle in your 20s, and then like 30s, you're like, I guess it's not so horrible. And then I feel like 40s, you're like, I can like figure shit out. Like, I'm really excited about that. But I feel like I'm watching all of my friends, like you and so many people we know, they're finding their footing and they're getting their foot in the door, and you're getting opportunities, and you're in a growth period. And there is an assumption, or there is a want from everyone to want to take your friends with you. And you and I have talked about this a lot. Like, you're like, yeah, we're going to work together. Or like, we're going to do something at some point. Like, eventually, like, I got to do a voiceover for your last season of Are You Afraid of the Dark, which was super fun. Guys, there's a podcaster in the show. You should listen to it. It's fast, but you got to listen. But so things like that, I want to talk about the realities of working with your friends, because I think there is a lot more red tape between you and getting to hire your friend than people know about. So can we discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. If you know me, I feel privileged and lucky to have gotten where I am. And when I have friends that are still struggling to break into the process, or even if they're in the game, but they just could use a break, like something lucky, I would love to deliver that, because I feel like it's only fair. And I do use this analogy that I think a lot of this town can benefit from, like the piggyback ladder system, where it's like you have to step over someone to climb higher, and then reach down your hand and let them go ahead of you. And then everyone can kind of reach the top together. It is hard. There is a lot of red tape. I know that. So I've been wanting to get you on my shows forever. And, it's funny. This actually ties back in with our earlier conversation about local hires, where everyone's down for it. And as the showrunner, I can kind of just like will you into that. But then they're like, well, can Sam be a local hire? And can we do this? And because we can only afford to bring in this person. And so you have to deal with those realities. Or we're looking for someone who's like, no, we need, this actor who can, we spent so much time looking for specifically for the villain role of season 3, an actor who can perform and do like the physicality behind the movements, which we ended up never needing in the show. But it's tough. And like I would take, if they're your good friends and they're telling you that they want to work with you, I would take them for their word. They probably have every intention of doing that, but it's not entirely up to them. And I certainly can't snap my fingers and make it happen. What I can do is position myself and you in the best places so that it could align. And I mean, obviously, when I had a podcast character in the show and I was like, Sam, can you record the voice? It would just be lovely to have you make a cameo before I can get you into something, bigger. And so that was fun. But there's a lot of hurdles to jump over. And I'll say I'm that first person who I want to find an actor. I want them to qualify for SAG on my shows. Like, I work really hard to try to position that. The same thing with the writers that I hire. I will hire an assistant writer for the room. And by the end of the show, I'm like, I'm going to refer you to whatever job you want, but I'm going to hope that you're going to position yourself to get that staff writer job. If you can't afford the union fees right now, I'll front you, and we can go and I'll talk to everyone, but you should try to position yourself. When I have other friends who I'm trying to, get gigs, I'll say, okay, and then, the show will pay you this much. And they're like, no, don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't, don't work for free. I think this is like there's a caveat to this, obviously. You have to work for free if it's just you out there. You need to be doing the auditions and you need to be writing those spec scripts. But once you're in the position where people are actually utilizing your services, no, you need to, and you deserve compensation for that. And so when it comes time to, finding people, they're like, I need a SAG card. I had, these friends in Vancouver that I had met, and they were our stand-ins, and they were so talented and they worked their asses off every day. And so before the season was over, I was like, I need a line from them. I need them to say a line right now on camera. Wrote it in on the spot, and they then had screen time, and it got them their SAG card. And I think those are the little hacks or the helpful hands that someone like a showrunner could provide you. They wish they could do more, but it is navigating. I would never hold it against someone, and I would hope vice versa, like a position in power would never hold it against someone who's upset that it's not happening for them. I think we're all trying to get to the top, and we're all trying to just chase our dreams. And so to keep that sense of humanity, but also don't be a dick. And if your friends are trying to be working actors and you have a gig, give it to your friends. Like,
yeah. And I think, well, it's also a nice reminder that like, there's so much more than one person making decisions on these things though, too. Like,
yes.
Yeah, you're those people who are your stand-ins, they showed up, they did the work every day, and you were able to pull some strings at the very end. Right. But that expectation was never necessarily there for them. You know what I mean? I have some actors who've come to me and said like, my friend has a show and they're the lead, and like, I've never auditioned for it. I'm like, but there's so many things you don't know about. Also, you don't even know if there's a role for you, right? Like, it's like,
oh yeah,
there's just so many pieces to the puzzle.
And it changes constantly. I remember a role that I had wanted you for in season 3, and it ended up we changed the character to like an 18-year-old. And Sam, I'm not doubting you could play any role that you wanted, but it was just going to be harder. Where we were like,
there's things we can do with lighting, but that's all I'm saying.
It's a big leap going to like, I was thinking Sam Valentine, and now we're looking for a 17-year-old local hire in the Dominican Republic. Where I was like, she doesn't tick the boxes anymore, but maybe there's something we can do. I would hope that everyone can just be a little like understanding. Obviously, as powerful as a showrunner is, as powerful as one of the actors playing an Avenger is, it's not ultimate say. You'd actually be surprised at how little say they are, because the wrong type of people just look at them as numbers. Everyone is going through the same challenges, no matter what level you get to. I think that's actually a takeaway. Like, obviously be excited to start booking and getting in there, but you're just going to move your own finish line even further ahead, which is so good. I'm not saying don't do that. You need to keep setting the bar higher for yourself, but it never feels like you've won the race ever.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and I think this is a lovely note for us to end on, because we started with the fact that in school, you kept setting your bar higher. It started with like, oh, we're going to make some things on the weekends. Oh, we're going to film a show. Oh, well, actually, I'm going to buy a camera. Now we're going to film a movie. Then you got to LA, a script got bought. Cool. It never got made. Okay. Make the pivot, do the thing, right? Like, there's just so many, you sold a show to Quibi. Then Quibi died, right? And like it's a nice reminder that as much as we think as actors, sometimes we get a little myopic and like, oh, this business is so hard on us. It's like the rejection, we get so much rejection. It's like every edge of this business is experiencing the same things, and every person in it is going through the same ringer. And if we could all understand that, there's a lot more of a power balance and little less like us versus them. And it's just so much lovelier to exist in it.
It is. I mean, that's such an insightful thing. And thank you. Because as you were just going through, I was like, wow, yeah, all I'm hearing is like failure. But
what I see is bounce back.
It is just perspective. There's a show that I developed and I wrote it, and I cannot wait for it to get made, if ever. But it's been like, I think now 6 different people who are big people or big companies have attached themselves to it. And every single time it's like, yep, this is it. It's happening with them. And then it falls short. I don't think you can be reactionary to things like that. And you certainly can't hold ill will against your craft when things aren't balancing into place. Because if anything, yeah, defeat sucks and having to fail and go back to the drawing board. But I think I maintain a healthy mindset, and I hope everyone else listening can, when use that energy to be like, hey, it got to the right people. So this is just another opportunity to go even bigger. And so if you're getting those callbacks and if you're doing everything right, and you can just feel it in your bones that you get the audition or that you're going to get the role, and then you get the bad news that it didn't swing your way, that is not what you should be processing, is how little you had left to go, or how imperfect you are because you didn't meet that expectation for yourself. What your takeaway should be is like, I got so close and I can do it again. I can get even closer.
Oh, I love that. Where do you want to direct people to? What projects, what spaces, any social media, anything like that?
Nothing. I'm on I'm on social media, but I'm sure you can just find me. There's nothing really interesting except pictures of my dogs. I would say if you want to check out some stuff,
Love
you
those.
can watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? That's streaming on Paramount Plus, and actually just watch a lot of Paramount Plus because I have 3 franchises in the mix coming up. So that's just where you'll see a lot of my work.
3 franchises. That is a bounce back, ladies and gentlemen. JT, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.